Lee County Board of Commissioners are now reconvening their commissioners meeting.
Camden County Board of Education will reconvene their D7 2020 meeting.
Camden County Board of Commissioners, we need to approve the agenda. We have a motion to approve the agenda. Okay, we have a motion to approve the agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passed.
Motion to approve the December 7th joint meeting of the Camden County Board of Education and Board of Commissioners.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Purcell, seconded by Dr. Banks. All in favor,
Get roll call.
please, Ms. Anita, if you'll give us our roll call vote.
Dr. Banks.
Here.
Ms. Eilert. Mr. Heath. Mr. Purcell.
Aye.
Ms. Murphy.
Motion carries. Thank you. We will now discontinue our presentations. We have with Mr. Bowman, Dr. Farrell, Mr. Ott, Ms. Dennis, and Mr. Cheatwood. Turn the floor over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Farrell and I will go over a brief update. I think that's the way that I'll leave it out. It'll be fine. Brief update of the year's projects and significant events that have taken place throughout this year. With that being said, I'm going to highlight just some of these, and I'm going to try to stay on the weeds. Not that we have too much time, because I know there's other items that we want to talk about. I appreciate Rick Ott, the staff coming up today to join us. And we also have David Cheatwood, the first trial on financials, county's financial advisor. If they want, oh, they have mine.
Yes, sir.
David, are you on? Can you hear us?
David.
Okay. Okay, all right, very good. So we'll hear from those folks after Dr. So to lead it off, I'm gonna start back at the beginning of this year, when we started working at the 2020-21 budget. Just to give you an update, some of the points on that budget that was adopted by the Board of Commissioners on the 1st of July was to strive to maintain the same budget projection adopted in 2019-2020. Those did not change. We were able to do that. One of the highlights was there was no tax increase that was proposed by the Board of Commissioners for the last 3 years. We have not increased the tax base for the budget. We did have a staff COLA, 2% COLA. And the staff continue to minimize the financial impact of county operations on the citizens. And we are funding also some of the capital goals as indicated in the capital improvement plan. The Commerce Park, we've been getting some traction there recently. Alcohol Electric recently installed three-phase power along Opportunity Drive and 6 security light poles in there at a cost of about $82,000. That was something that finalized the power there at the Commerce Park. Eastern Carolina Engineering, they prepared RFPs for bids to place drainage pipes and construct a 300-foot gravel roadway into the property there on the right as you go into Commerce Park for Manium Transportation, which I'll cover with you in just a minute. They're going to be occupying that area, which is about 10 acres. So we were able to get that entranceway put in there. That was at a cost of just over $100,000. There are currently 2 bids in to extend the main road at the Commerce Park back to lot 14, where southeastern equipment is going to be occupied. As a matter of fact, we've been working very hard with those folks there in Chesapeake. They will be moving their entire company from Chesapeake to the Commerce Park. They will take the 16 acres in the back as you go in all the way in the back. So they are excited about this. Matter of fact, our county attorney has already looked at the sales agreement, giving me the thumbs up, so we should be closing on that property within the next 2 weeks. And as economic development, we also designed a brand new marketing brochure for the Camden Commerce Park. That's on the streets now. We've also started getting interest outside of the area for those those small interior 2-acre, 2.5-acre lots that surround that pond up there. So we're excited about that. Now there's activity. We're looking at some more interest now in the Commerce Park. As I mentioned, Southeastern Equipment, they'll be coming to the park. They're going to occupy 16 acres to the rear of the Commerce Park. Management Transportation is leased the first 10 acres as you come into the park on the right-hand side. That's adjacent to Route 17. They are planning to purchase that 10 acres within the next 36 months. So you'll see some activity up there. They're going to start putting a chain link fence up around at least 2 acres so they can start moving some equipment in. The stormwater plan has been drafted by their engineers. It's currently in review right now through our planning department. The new library, final design is with Boomerang out of Raleigh, North Carolina. That's almost complete. We're looking for a final on that. Once that's finished, then the company, MBCon, is working with us as our advisor on that, and we'll be sending out the RFPs, right, for that for construction. So they'll be doing that shortly, probably after the first of the year. The funding has been approved at $3.6 million, and financing is being coordinated through the financial consultant, again, the first tryout out of Charlotte. Target date for completion is September 2021. This is hot off the press, but the medical building has been, we've negotiated the deal with that. You all know it's in the Camden Medical Park over there. It's the one that the county has owned for a number of years now. It's just been sitting vacant. We've had interest in that all along, but finally somebody's come to the county with a legitimate contract. That'll be placed on the January 4th agenda, January 4th, 2021 agenda for public hearing. So that medical building looks like it's going to be sold, we'll put back on the tax rolls again, and there's going to be a like type use, which is going to be a medical type use there. The CARES funding, I've been working closely with a lot of our businesses throughout the county. Alexandra Leckie is our new economic development marketing coordinator. She came on board simply to handle the CARES funding. The county received a total of $630,000 from the CARES funding. To date, approximately $460,000 has been distributed throughout the county. We didn't know we had so many small businesses. I mean, some of them literally are small businesses, one-person operations. We were able to give, I think, everybody, I mean, that applied for this, except for like 3 people, funds. And it went from anywhere from $500 to $2,500 an application. So we still have about $120,000 to $30,000 left to distribute. We, as staff, we currently worked on facility upgrades, improved technology. A lot of the money went to that. Preponderance of the money went to that. Radios and pagers for the sheriff's office and the fire departments, and stockpiling some PPE in case this outbreak, this pandemic doesn't want to let go. We still have those supplies in stock, and we're ready to make distribution as needed. Camden Schools received $50,000 out of this money. We presented that check, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I guess, something like that. And then emergency management in Elizabeth City, we gave them $15,000 for some technology upgrades in their office over there because we're part of that emergency management piece. Eastern Shore Communications is our contracted company to do the broadband within the county. Just talked to the president of that company a couple of days ago. I think it was Wednesday or Thursday. The materials are on site finally, and there was a lag of getting the resources and the materials simply because of the coronavirus. His suppliers pretty much shut down, as everyone else's did. But he's gotten his fiber now, he's gotten his materials, he's assured us that they're in. He's got his subs back to start laying the ground, doing the fiber laying. They're going to start placing that along Shipyard Road, from Shipyard Road to the North Water Tower located on 694 and Route 343. So that should start here shortly. They've already put the raised platforms in at that water tower for the installation of the backup generator that's going to be located there. A company called Tank Care is working on the antenna construction at that water tower, which will be welded to the tower. I got an email just between our break from this morning and this meeting here, that they will be on site there within the next week. They've already got everything they need to go up there and start welding those mounts to the tower. The company has also touched base with a number of the farmers throughout the county and got permission to install fixed wireless on these grain elevators, grain storage units that are out here, some of the highest towers within the county. So he's working, I think he's working pretty diligently, even though it seems like it's behind on this. Everybody's behind simply because of suppliers not being able to produce what they needed to get, as with everything else, to get this thing moving forward. Keep you posted on that because we desperately need it. And the last thing I've got is the new high school, of course, and that's primarily what we're here for. But the facility study, just as a recap, was completed by MBCon, and the information was shared with both the boards, commissioners, and the education. The schools received a $12.3 million grant from the state, and the bond referendum was passed November 3rd, 2020. And pretty much that's all I've got, unless there are questions. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, and my focus will be a little bit more narrow, but as a reminder, Ken mentioned the budget season, I always call it, for the 1920 school year, or for the 2021 school year, and we're about to go into that again now for the 21-22 school year. But as a reminder, focusing on capital, what we always do is reach out to our schools and ask for their capital needs. And we typically get things like radio replacements and repairs, general painting, gym floor maintenance is always something that we have to work with or perform. HVAC, drainage issues on playgrounds, roofing issues, and things like that. We also get some special requests like, kindergarten teachers might need cabinets built in their classrooms, or they're trying to do some sort of smart TV project on a hallway or something like that. And so we take all of those things into consideration, and then we put together a capital request as a reminder to both boards that we always, that's something that changes every year depending on what the needs are. Sometimes it's higher and sometimes it's lower. Last year we had approximately $600,000 of requests, and you all were gracious enough to give us $405,000 of our request. And so then what we do is go back and prioritize which of those things need to be done most critically, and then those things that we can't get to in a school year, we because of a difference in funding, we will then move that to a priority list for the following year. And so that ultimately, hopefully, all those projects get completed. A couple of things that are extremely important, I think, to mention this year that have already been taken care of. We are working on the upgrades at Camden Early College, and those upgrades include adding student restrooms inside the facility, and also enclosing those breezeway type setups between each building, so that when students enter, or when anyone enters at the front of the school near the main office, then there's kind of a long hallway created there to go through all of the buildings, and that keeps someone, an intruder or someone that we would not want inside the building, from just walking up to one of those breezeway type areas and just walking inside the building. Now they do have fire exit or emergency exit doors there with the push bars, so students can go out of those doors if there were an emergency, but then they can't come back in those doors because they close and lock. The $90,000 that you all included for Chromebook specific upgrades, some of that has been completed this year and some of it has not, and that's simply a supply issue, but those things will be completed before the end of the year. Obviously, Mr. Bowman just mentioned that of your CARES Act funding or of the county's CARES Act funding, the schools were given $50,000 of that. That money went directly to each school, $10,000 to each school for the purpose of connectivity and buying student devices. So we are very grateful for that. We were able to use that plus some of the CARES Act funding that the school system received directly to give each school around $20,000 to increase the number of student devices, which obviously now with COVID is more critical than ever. Some things that remain to be done on the list, because we're just getting to the halfway point of the school year. One of the most critical things is fire alarm system upgrades that will be done prior to the end of the school year. And so with that, I will ask, I think Larry Lawrence is back there somewhere. Is there anything that you'd add to that?
Sir, I think Chairman realized that we thank the county for what they do and our school for what they do. Trying to keep our schools the best they are. Thank you very much.
Yes, and I agree with that. We are grateful. People come to visit and talk about the great job that this county has done with maintaining our current facilities. So people are actually quite often amazed at how great our schools look. So thank you to the boards for that, and thank you to Larry and his staff for that as well. And then, of course, the big capital project, I suppose, that's on everyone's mind right now is the new high school project. As Ken has already given you kind of an update or a reminder of how all of that played out. As he said, on November 3rd, it did pass. The referendum passed with 4,147 yes votes to 1,530 no votes. And so that brings us to where we are today. And I will turn it over. If there are questions for me first, then I will turn it over to Rick Ott to talk about the new high school project.
Thank you, Dr. Earl. Bowman, it's a pleasure to be here again, and especially on the heels of an overwhelmingly successful bond referendum. In my wildest dreams, I never believed that it passed by 73%. If I'm good here, sitting, I'll be here. If I need to move up front, I will as well.
Can you all hear the Zoom question?
Ashley Dennis with Mosley Architects will be participating a little later in the presentation. If you have questions as I go through, feel free to stop me and ask the questions. I'm happy to do that. I want to bring everybody up to speed. It's been almost a year or so now, maybe longer, since we started this process. And of course, the school district has been in the high school mode for almost 20 years now. So this is really been a very long process. As Mr. Bowman said, we did do a pretty exhaustive facility study that looked out about 15 years. We looked at a lot of different options on how we could potentially solve the current overcrowding that you have and the future growth issues that we anticipate. Ultimately, the two boards decided that the construction of a new high school was the most cost-efficient way to solve the problem of growth in all of the schools. And so that in itself led to a bond referendum, which was successful. The current high school's got approximately a little over 600 students. It has about 81,500 square feet. New high school and early college that's being proposed will be able to accommodate your current student population, and we will have core facilities for about 800 students, which should give you some pretty a good room for growth in the facility. The current size of that facility is 128,050 square feet. We started this process after the facility study was approved by working with the school district staff,
teachers, Amber and her folks, and put together an educational program that totaled approximately 159,445 square feet. That basically took the minimum classroom size standards that North Carolina DPI recommends, and then the other spaces that we needed, and that totaled up to approximately 160. That number was way over the budget. The school board and both the county had targeted about a 10-cent tax increase as something that would be palatable by the public. So we started reductions in the program itself. Our first round of cuts was approximately 19,000 square feet. Those were painful cuts, but we were able to get there. Mr. Cheatwood with First Tron came in and provided us with a number of financial options to review for even further consideration. The school board sent me and our architect, Ashley, back to the cutting board once again. We had to reduce, we had to reduce, we lose our presentation, folks? We had to reduce in order to get that budget target number of about 10,322 square feet. I will tell you that second round of cuts was extremely painful. That pretty much took any of the additional spaces. In order to get there, we actually reduced the classrooms to a little smaller than what the state recommends, but we think it's a functional program. In a final meeting with the school board, they looked at a couple of alternates and made some decisions which reduced the square footage another 2,213 square feet for 128,050 square feet. Total reductions to date, 31,395 square feet, which got us to the $33 million bond number that was put out to the public. And that's been about a 20% reduction in the square footage of the building. Part of the problem we have with this site is that, or with the project itself, is the site development cost. Until we really get the engineering done, it's hard to put a hard number on that site development cost. And so the modifications we've been making to date really have primarily focused on the building. And you can see some of the areas that we have actually reduced space in. We also pretty significantly reduced the athletic allowance that we have, and I'll show you a little bit more about that. But that got us down to our current budget of $45,287,400. There are some off-site improvements on the highway, some decel lanes and that sort of thing. DOT will give us an option. They'll either pay for the bus parking or they'll pay for those off-site improvements. And in all likelihood, we estimate that it would be our preference that they pay for the roadway improvements and that the district pay for the bus parking area. You can see we've broken this project budget down into a format that Mr. Cheatwood with First Tron has requested, and we will be continually upgrading this same budget breakdown as we go through the process. We're currently carrying a little bit of money in there for furnishings and a little bit of money in for technology improvements in the building itself. Project financing, Mr. Cheatwood will be going into a little more detail in a few minutes. I will say again, congratulations. Your bond referendum committee worked extremely hard to pass this referendum. They did a great job, but I will tell you, as hard as a campaign committee may work, bond referendums don't pass unless the citizens have respect for the leadership provided by the county commission and the school board. And I think that says a lot for the fact that this passed by 73%. So including the state monies that we have to date, our approved project funding is $45,287,400. 33 million, which was approved by the voters in November. The financial model that we are currently using that gets us towards that 10 mil number is a 30-year USDA loan. We've been in contact with them this past week, as well as the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction for their $12,287,400 state grant. We are also keeping our eyes open for additional state monies that may come down the pipe during the next couple of legislative sessions. And we are looking for some funding for the county emergency shelter aspect of this project as well. Both of those things we're looking for. So under the grant itself, we have to execute the agreement. We're working with the State Department of Education to get that going. We are working on an accounting format. The way this typically works is that the school district will actually pay the bills, working with the county, and then the state will reimburse on a monthly or quarterly basis. We're working on that now. We want to make sure that we are keeping track of all the costs in such a way that the state will be happy with it. One of their requirements is that we meet all state design and review standards for a high school constructed in the state of North Carolina. The other portion, if the county chooses to pursue this methodology of the USD Rural Development Grant, they will allow up to a 40-year maximum term. Currently, I think the models that Mr. Cheatwood has kind of focused on is a 30-year term. I think our last call, the current interest rates are about 2.25%, which are pretty darn good. They will allow up to $100 million maximum loan guarantee. We're not going to need that much, thankfully. And they've recommended that we immediately get this process started. One of the issues of working with USDA is they won't actually loan you the money until you have pretty much all the bids in place and you're about 85% complete with construction before they, quote, move into the permanent financing. So we'll be working with Mr. Bowman and Mr. Cheatwood to set up a temporary construction loans, so to speak, with some of the local banks and that sort of thing. Again, before I move on, I want to mention one thing about the funding and the drawdowns itself. You're going to want to use the state monies first. And so we will have to have a little bit of money in order to meet the grant, 3-to-1 grant match. But we will take down that money first, and then you can start dipping into the construction financing. That'll save some interest rates on the funds itself. So overall, for project overview, as we mentioned earlier, initial construction, 600 students, 800 core capacity. We have an area that will be set aside for a future academic pod, which would allow you to add 200 to 300 students pretty easily. The main entrance is off Highway 343. The site is just down the road from here. We'll talk a little bit more about the actual design that you'll see, which is conceptual, and it's going to change pretty dramatically once we get started in schematics. Athletic fields and student parking will be in the rear of the site. That was one of the requests from the athletic department. They wanted to get all of their fields in kind of one area so that they could have ticketing and concessions and that sort of thing in a safe manner. And then also the school site will serve as a county emergency shelter. Ashley, would you like to talk a little bit about this?
So hopefully everyone can hear me from here. So you've probably seen these images through the bond referendum. These are the same images that were used during that. So this is just the site plan again, touching on the bullet.
Speak up just a little bit.
Ashley, come on up here and stand up.
Oh,
You ought to hear her in her job site meeting. She's much louder. She's talking
So,
contractors.
the images that you see here are the ones that were used during the bond referendum. So this is the preliminary site plan. Rick touched on a lot of the elements that you see with the site, the athletic fields being near the rear of the site. We have received our wetland delineation and they did not change. So we're starting to receive a lot of that preliminary site information in. So what is kind of shown there was our guesstimate of where it is, and it has remained the same. So we do have the amount of site that we were hoping to be able to utilize, will be able to be utilized, yes, right there. And then there's a small sliver at the south end of the site. And Rick, you can go on unless there's something else you want to touch on for this one.
Well, one of the things that I would point out is that we've made provisions for a connection to the road in the back of the site. That is a future aspect of the project. And this is likely going to change. We've looked at the bus drop off, maybe being moved to the other side so that as the students are dropping off, they can go right into the cafeteria for the breakfast program or the gymnasium, that sort of thing. Again, still not quite sure. This is an area here for the future expansion for another academic pod. But again, this site will be driven pretty much by the design of the building, and we're just starting that process right now.
Again,
One question before you go on. The size of that roof and the size of those pods and stuff, if there were a fire or ever been a shooter in there, I don't know how you isolate that situation. Because with sections and wings, you can at least shut it down and isolate it. I don't see much isolation there. Especially a fire.
That's a good question. And first, let me say that these designs were primarily done to make sure that it would fit on the site, that there wasn't going to be any big surprises. Now, the program, the educational program that we did describes the type of spaces in each of the academic pods. However, again, what Ashley did here was just to depict it, make sure it would fit. We're just now starting the design process where all this will be refined, and in all likelihood, there are going to be a number of changes. The board has already made some comments. My folks have made some comments, and Ashley's going to talk to you a little bit in a few more slides about the process of meeting back again with the stakeholders, which is Amber's staff and that sort of thing. But all of the facilities that we construct will have to meet the state insurance codes and the state building codes. And that requires fire doors, separation, firewalls, smoke walls, dampers, those kind of things. That's a good question. Ashley?
so this is the floor plan, and to kind of touch on your question, we have SEPTED certified staff within Mosley, and so what that is staff that have been certified through the safety protocols for anything like active shooter or things like that. So they review all of our plans to make sure that we're meeting the basic requirements, and then we walk through even some of the higher opportunities to provide safety with all of the stakeholders, so that we will go through that exercise. Obviously, we're not there yet because we're still working on really preliminary things right now. So this just kind of lays out, like Rick said, to make sure that the program space could lay out on the site. One of the things you'll see is kind of clustering the public spaces away from the academic. So everything kind of to the lower end of the screen in the floor plan are the academic pods, and everything to the upper side are the public spaces. That is not only for ease of use, but also for security, for after hours event, and again, for the storm shelter use or emergency shelter use. When you're having community utilize the space after hours, we want to make sure that it's easy to close off the rest of the school that they're not going to be utilizing. So those are some things that we wanted to make sure just the massing in general would lay out on the site and give an opportunity to have something for staff to start reacting to as we move further in design.
So after we start that process, this is going to change probably pretty substantially. But we'll be keeping you informed as we go through each process of the design.
Change substantially. Back up to that picture just 1 second.
Sure.
Both of those pictures have 30+ breaks in the roof line. I spent a lot of years in contracting business. Every time you make a break in a roof line, you got a potential leak. And it costs our maintenance people enormous amounts of money to maintain that we don't need. The roof line needs to be as continuous as possible to still meet the requirements of safety and the state. But those buildings right there look like somebody took a jigsaw puzzle and put them together to me. It's
Well,
exactly what it looks like.
your comments are actually on my list as well, but we haven't really gotten focused on this design
Right.
because
I heard
right.
that. So, but I want to say up front that, what we're looking for.
Right.
So we don't come back with a design that looks like this and think people's gonna like it. If we're gonna spend this much money, we want to get the right thing, and we want it to be pleasant for the people of the community to look at, because they're gonna be paying on it for 30 years. If I'm paying on it for 30 years, I wanna make sure that I've got something I want. And if I drive by it every day and have a headache, I'm gonna be mad.
Well, having worked with Mr. Lawrence before, I can tell you he's a tough taskmaster. And one of the very first meetings we had when we started this process, Larry gave us a long list of things that were acceptable to the school district to put in this school. And so I agree with you. What we're going to look for is something that is low maintenance, high quality, and that will last a long time. And we want to keep the material simple. One of the things that Mr. Lawrence has been very emphatic about is he doesn't want to have to call Virginia Beach or Raleigh or Charlotte to get somebody out here to work on something. He wants us to put in the type of building systems that he can work on with his staff and that he can get parts for locally. And so
Hey, Larry, good money. He uses his knowledge, he does a good job.
he earns it. I will tell you, he earns it. But again, you're going to be involved as we go through the design process. We'll be back in front of the boards when we get a schematic design that the staff agrees upon, and we'll be providing an updated estimate at that point in time. By that time, we will have the engineering done on the site work itself. So what we've done is we've kind of established a management schedule when the project will start. Right now, we are looking at a April groundbreaking for the project itself and an early site package, because in my mind, it's really critical for us to get the cost on the site development so that we can get a good handle on exactly how much space we can build in the building itself. And so we've developed a cash flow on how the monies would be drawn down upon, which would we will use with Mr. Cheatwood in order to do the most efficient financing. What I will say right now is currently we are looking at a December 22 move-in. This is a pretty aggressive schedule. What I'm probably going to tell Joe is plan for May and for a April move-in, but for right now, we're going to be aggressive and shoot for 2022. I will say that once projects are funded, then the enemy is inflation. And so what we want to do is get this project bid as quickly as we can and get it underway and get it constructed as quickly as possible. So some of the key dates.
How many classrooms can we pick up from what we have now to what you're proposing? Classrooms itself?
I'd have to go back and count them. I'll get that information for you though.
I appreciate you.
The biggest part that we end up doing though is all of the early college portable classrooms all get moved into a permanent building. So right now, Ashley is working, and I'm going to let her talk a little bit more about what she's going to be doing over the next 2 months. But we're going to try to have a schematic design, at least for a discussion purposes, in January of 2021, design development in April of 2021. The early site package that I mentioned earlier, which is the grading, storm drainage, that sort of thing, April of 2021. The groundbreaking would probably be April or May, depending on your schedules. And then have completed construction documents in August of 2021 and final design approval and bids for the balance of the project in 2021. Now, let me also add, at each of these stages, at schematic design, at design development, and final construction documents will be back in front of the board, getting their definitive approval over those designs at each step of the way. Ashley, why don't you talk just a few minutes about the next?
Yeah, so our next steps in the next 2 months, and that includes this month that we're in, is that we're going to be meeting with the administrators, teachers, staff, students to go over the program, make sure that we fully understand the needs within the space. We've already done a lot of early gathering, and Beacon has done a great job of meeting with Larry and his staff to get equipment that we'll need to have in there so our engineers can start designing around that. But we want to make sure that we have all questions answered on spaces and how they function so that when we're laying those spaces out in the schematic design, they're laid out appropriately, and we incorporate any comments related to roofing or other things like that so that the next time go around, we're not back to where we are. We want to always make sure that we're moving forward and hearing and incorporating appropriately. So that's going to be what the next 2 months is really going to be about, is getting those meetings together and hearing from all the stakeholders.
At this point in time, I'll recognize David Petty on my staff. His job is going to be to make sure that we don't add back another 30,000 square feet to the process. So we do have a good plan on moving forward. I will tell you, this will be a model high school project for, I think, the rural Southeast. I think you're going to have a lot of folks visiting this school. It will incorporate all the modern educational trends, but better yet, it's going to be flexible in such a way that if we're teaching in a different methodology or different types of programs or projects or curriculum in 50 years, this building will adapt to that. And that's one of the things that we started out from the very beginning, asking the question, how will we be teaching students in 50 years? And how do we build a building that will be as flexible and adaptable as we possibly can in that 50 to 75 year time? Because as you said, we're going to be paying for it for 30 years, but you're going to be using this building for the next 75 in all likelihood. Well, maybe, I don't know. I probably won't be around for that.
Conditions like we've done on the last three schools, they'll last 200 or 300 years because you take care of them.
You better hire Mr. Lawrence, a good replacement then, if you can get that. But we understand this is a huge commitment on part of the taxpayers, and we want to give them the best quality building that will last the longest that we possibly can. And one of the things that I'll say, I mean, this is a historical moment in Camden County. You only get to build a high school once every 3 or 4 generations in a community, especially a rural community. And so when we have that building dedication and your name goes on that plaque, that'll be up there for the next 75, 80 years, however long that building's being utilized. And that is a historical thing, and I think you folks should be very proud of the part that you are playing in the history of the growth and development of this county itself. We've put together a rather detailed management schedule for the project. This is a tool that we use to keep ourselves on track, but also for the board and the commissioners, the principals, and the public to follow along with each of those activities and when we are expecting those approvals. It's easy to start missing a week here or there. It's hard to catch up. And so we want to keep everybody on track. We will be monitoring this schedule, monitoring budget. We'll be providing the Board of Education with a monthly progress report that will be posted on the district's website. So all of the 4,000 plus people that supported and the few that did not will be able to track the progress of this project. And so a little bit about the next steps. Ashley's talked a little bit about that. We're deep into the engineering on the site itself. Timmons is doing a good job. They're very familiar with this dirt up here. But again, there is a lot of risk anytime you start doing a major project in Camden County, given the soil types that we have here. We want to confirm the funding with Mr. Cheatwood and the county. We want to make sure that we abide by all of the accounting procedures that's going to be expected of us. Again, that makes sure that we keep the cash flowing to the contractors and that we are dotting all of our I's and crossing those T's, so to speak. Anytime you have grant money in there, there's a high level of counting. One of the commitments that we make at MBCon makes to Camden County is that we have a completely transparent process and you'll be able to see where every dollar goes. I'll also remind you that at the end of the project, all of the savings, 100% of the savings will remain with the school district and the county. We know exactly what we're going to make if we do a good job. And so any savings that we bring forth stays with the county. As Ashley said, we're already have scheduled meetings with the teachers, principals, Dr. Farrell's executive staff. Larry is going to be a very busy man here in the next couple of months as this design is being developed. And hopefully by next January, into January, we'll have a pretty decent schematic design in place. And with that, that concludes our presentation. We'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much. I think Mr. Cheatwood may have some here. David?
Hey, Joe, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Presentation, do they have that in hand there? Should I pull it up on my screen and look? I share it on my screen, which is the best.
So I can make Mr. Cheatwood the host,
Well, I think if he just starts talking, he'll become the primary.
right? But he wants to project something for people to see on the screen.
Yeah, that's it.
Put a microphone next to Dr. Farrell's.
Right, I just made him the host, so that should. There you go. You can, except that, do you see the screen when our pictures are over to the side? Can you slide that? Because I made you the host, I can't do
Get used to these, we do a lot of live streaming technologies.
It's great. And you know how to use it.
Lots of fun. This is some of the most important stuff that he's gonna say.
In the top left corner. Okay, so if you can go back to where you just were. Okay, we can see it all right there. We just have to go to your next slide, maybe, and we'll see what we're gonna be looking at. Yeah, that's just wrong. Jay, we're gonna go ahead and just make hard copies of your presentation, to both assets. And so if you can give us just a minute to get that done, then they can listen to you and look at the hard copy.
We're gonna have a recess on our part for about. That's about two.
So while they're making copies,
I need to talk louder, but, first off, thanks everybody for having me here today. My name is David Cheapwood. I was a firm called First-Time Advisors. We have served as the county's financial advisor over the last several years, helped them on a couple of different financings. Currently in the process of helping them on the library financing that Ken mentioned earlier. Joe, if you're trying to talk to me, you're muted.
I am muted, you were right about that. And can you, they are asking me to speak up.
Okay, I will talk louder. Again, David Cheapwood, First-Time Advisor, served as the county financial advisor for the last several years. Here to talk to you a little bit about the financing, potential financing for this new high school project and the impact that it will have on the county's revenue. For those on the board, I have met with y'all a couple of times in the past, most recently back in the early March timeframe, specifically talking about this school project and the financing. We talked through a lot of different scenarios, both in terms of how much to borrow and what the impact would be, how long the repayment term we have on that financing. So a lot of different scenarios will run. As I believe Rick mentioned, the scenario that we settled on back in the spring was a 30-year financing through USDA. And so when we look at some of the numbers in the slides that I have, and hopefully you have in front of you as well, that's the scenario that we're focused on today. So, and by way of background, most of this has already been covered, or a lot of it has. As you all know, we're looking at a new high school in Rose College and an estimated cost of approximately $45.3 million, as Rick provided to you earlier. Of that amount, the county and the district that received state grant money of about $12.3 million, leaving the balance $33 million that would be funded with debt. As we all know, back in November, voters approved that the county approved the issuance of up to $33 million of general obligation bonds to fund the specific needs. It's been a while. The county doesn't have any outstanding general obligation debt, but it's been a while since we've issued it. Just as a reminder, when you issue general obligation bonds, you are pledging the full faith, credit, and taxing power of the county, the most secure pledge that the county can give. When you go to issue general obligation bonds, you can do that in one of three different markets. The first is the public market. That's where you put an offering document or a disclosure document together. You get the bonds rated. You hire an underwriter that goes and sells the bonds to a variety of different investors in the public market. Insurance companies, mutual funds, individuals, etc. A second option is what we call the bank market. That's where you can go directly to a bank or banks and solicit proposals from them to buy and hold those bonds on their own balance sheet. So you can go to Bank of America, Wells Fargo, the Truist, and ask them for an interest rate for them to buy that loan, so they are the bondholder. A third option, not available to everybody, but potentially can qualify, is USDA financing. And so you are still issuing general obligation bonds, but instead of public market bondholders, instead of a bank purchasing the bond, USDA is the bondholder. So it's still a general obligation bond, it's still reflecting the full faith, credit, and taxing power. It's just that USDA is the one that's holding that bond, and that's the one we're focused on here today. Going back to the discussion we had in the spring with the board and looking at all the different options, very similar to your home mortgage. The longer you borrow, the more interest you're going to pay over time, but the lower your annual, or in the case of a mortgage, your monthly payment will be. So there's always a trade-off in terms of the total lowest overall borrowing cost is going to be if you borrow for a shorter period, but your lowest annual impact would be if you borrow over a longer period. We looked at different options ranging from 20 years to 40 years. And what we settled on back then, as you mentioned earlier, was a 30-year term where you pay the same amount every year, what we call a level repayment or level debt service structure, mortgage style, same payment each year, versus there are cases where you pay level principal. So your highest payments thereafter. So the structure we're talking about here, and they can see these numbers, 30-year level debt service or level repayment, that was thought to be the most advantageous term or structure for the county, where it really balanced both needs. The need to lower the annual debt service payment, therefore lower or try to mitigate the tax impact, as well as trying to find the right balance between not paying as much in interest as you would with a 40-year loan, for instance. On the USDA front, the county staff has had preliminary conversations with them. They've provided an indicative interest rate of 2.125% for a 30-year financing. And so those, that's the assumption we have baked into the numbers you'll see. Moving on to page 2, this is at a high level what the county would expect to repay over a 30-year period. You borrow $33 million at a 2.125% interest rate, you would expect to pay about $1.5 million per year in debt service. I've run it again at a high level, assuming you borrowed at the end of fiscal 2022. So, June of 2022, if you start doing repay it over a 30-year period. Now, if the school's not done until December of 2022, obviously we skipped everything out, but this is our starting from assumption. So $1.5 million is what you all would have to repay on that $33 million. And so when we look at the revenues available, the county schools, they have to generate revenue to pay this debt service, $1.5 million. As I believe Greg mentioned earlier, this would be, the USDA would be the permanent lender. You would have to get interim financing during the construction period, most likely with a bank. And so that would be something we help the county with when it's time, next springtime, when it was time to start construction, you want to put that interim financing in place so you knew you had those funds available, that coupled with the state grant revenue to complete the project. You would pay some interest on that interim financing. I have not baked that into this analysis yet. And trying to keep it a little bit more high level, but you would expect to pay some interest on that interim financing. When we look at revenues, we talk about one side of the ledger, the debt service side, that's what you have to repay. When we talk about the other side, what revenues do you have available to repay it? There's two main revenue streams available for the county. The first is sales tax. So as you all know, there's statewide 4.75% sales tax, and then the county levies an additional 2%. 1 cent of that is under Article 39, half a cent is under Article 40 and 42. Under the Article 40 and 42 sales tax, there's a specific amount that there's a breakdown between what the county can use for general purposes and what it has to use for school capital or debt service needs. I've highlighted both of those. Article 40 is 30% for school. Article 42 is 60% that you have to apply towards that. In addition to those two specific articles, a couple of years back, there was a new statute 105-524 that basically provided for an additional distribution of sales tax revenues that was restricted for economic development, public education, and community college purposes. So again, since that's got the public education school portion of it and the sales tax, I'm lumping all three of those different buckets together when we talk about the sales tax available to the county to apply for this debt service. That aggregate amount based on the fiscal 2020 unaudited at this point revenues was about 1.1 million. So between your Article 40, Article 42, the particular percentage for school capital under those two articles, and then the portion of your 105-524 sales tax revenues was 1.1 million. Of that amount, you all are currently paying debt service on existing school debt. There's two series of outstanding debt that are school related. You are paying about $575,000 through fiscal year 2023. A portion, one of those series matures, drops off. And so beginning in fiscal 2024 and going out for many years, your debt service on that, which is also USD loan, $520,000. So of the 1.1 million, right now, you're using 575,000 for existing debt service, and then, in a couple of years, that will drop down to 520,000. Also, as I think you heard Bill mention, the school is gonna have annual maintenance and capital needs on a going forward basis on its other, projects that varies year to year in terms of what they request to do and what county board funds. We had to make an assumption on what that would be, because that is typically, not always, but have to be, but typically funded out of those restricted sales tax funds. And so what we've done for a starting point is we said $100,000 would be set aside and used for annual maintenance and capital needs. And so when we look at, of the 1.1 million, how much of that could go towards this new debt? Well, we have to take out the amount we're paying for existing debt service, and then if you back out that $100,000 that was earmarked for annual maintenance needs, what you're looking at from sales tax revenues is $425,000 in fiscal year 2023, in fiscal year 2024, and then approximately $480,000 thereafter. Again, it bumps up because part of your existing school debt drops off. Now, of course, with all this, the caveat is this is sales tax collection. That's going to be subject to fluctuation each and every year. So again, we've got to make certain assumptions when we look at projections. We can assume that that is flatlined over your fiscal 2020 level. The other bucket of money available is property tax. So that one's pretty straightforward. Your value of one penny is approximately $100,000. You've seen some growth in that over time, not a huge amount of growth. We assume that $100,000 value of penny grows by 1% per year thereafter. So bear with me on some numbers here. I know there's a lot of numbers on this page, and hopefully most of you have it in front of you. So I'm going to work left to right on this spreadsheet. So this is from a model we built with the county going back, a year, actually several years ago, to help with these types of needs, in particular this high school need, in terms of what the property tax impact would be depending on the size of the borrower. So working left to right, again, this is the sales tax collection between the school portion of the Article 42, Article 40, Article 42, and then the Section 524. That's your 1.1 million coming in each and every year. Out of that amount, as we just talked about, you're going to have to pay existing school debt service, which is $575,000 the next few years, and then it drops down to $520,000 out through fiscal year 2047. In addition, out of that amount, you carve out $100,000 per year in annual maintenance fees. That leads you to $425,000 for the next few years, and then $480,000 thereafter. And eventually, when all your debt matures, your existing debt out in 2047, all $1 million will be done. In terms of property tax revenues, what we've done within this model is, if we did, and this was communicated back in the spring when we looked at different scenarios, a 10-cent tax increase, what would that generate in terms of additional property tax revenue? Well, 10 cents on $100,000 is $1 million. With that 1% growth, you can see that if you implemented that 10-cent increase beginning this upcoming fiscal year, so beginning July 1, 2021, which is fiscal 2022, you would generate $1,011,000. And if that remained in place as your earmark for this debt service, that would grow slightly over time by 1% per year. So this yellow or orange column here is total revenues that we have available to pay debt service. And so it's the $425,000 to $480,000 per year, plus the $1 million or so per year here. What we're left with is about $1.5 million. It's a little bit lighter in these first couple of years, and then it gets to $1.5 million each and every year and grows slightly thereafter. As you'll remember from a debt service standpoint, that's $1.5 million in debt service that you have to pay each and every year. So if you went ahead and implemented that tax increase for fiscal year 2022, you would have a surplus within that because you don't have debt service already yet in 2022. With the one caveat, you probably have to pay a little, you would have to pay some interest on your interim financing. But you'd be able to bank that money, set that money aside, and I'll come back to that in a second. But what you'll look at on a going forward basis, that $1.5 million per year in revenues covers your $1.5 million per year in debt service. If you see that value of a penny grow by 1%, you're going to start to see a little bit of a surplus each and every year. If that surplus has been set aside, you can see what that does to your fund balance. I don't want to confuse this with the county's general fund balance. This is, if you can think of this as school debt service fund balance, this is what that would fall into. So you get all of it in fiscal year 2022, and then it incrementally grows thereafter. In fact, it's slightly less in fiscal year 2023, so you utilize $50,000 of that bank revenue, that school debt service revenue, and then it would grow slightly thereafter. Now, that money is there, it's property tax revenue, so it can be used for other county needs if it needed to, but it could also be used to help guard against a downturn in sales tax. If that 1.1 million is 1 million in a given year, then obviously we need a little bit of cushion. If your value of penny went down, that would also provide some cushion against that. So it's already some cushion in downturns of sales tax, property tax revenue. It can provide additional funding for school operating needs, for school capital needs. If I go back to $100,000 per year, not a whole lot of money in terms of budgeted kind of annual maintenance needs going forward. So it could be applied to that as well. Or as I mentioned, it could go towards additional county needs because it is, from your standpoint, it's property tax revenue. It's not internally, it's designated for that service, but externally it's not happening. So that's the picture to borrow $33 million over a 30-year level repayment period of 2.125% interest through USDA, using sales tax revenue that remains after existing debt service and budgeted capital contributions are paid, and with a 10-cent property tax increase. If you all, and I got one more slide with a couple things, and I'll take some questions, but if you all wanted to move forward with that, you heard from Rick about what has to happen on the construction side. On the financing side, we've got to make a formal application to USDA. As I mentioned, Kim and Stephanie have reached out to USDA staff in your area, talk about this, and the indications are positive, but there's an application you have to fill out. There's several attachments you have to provide. I don't want to make it sound like it's an easy process and you can get it in the next week. It's not. While I don't work always, in detail on the USDA applications, I've seen enough of them to know, and I've seen this, that there are several steps involved. And USDA sometimes is not the quickest to turn that around. So I want to stress that if you wanted to move forward with that, that really needs to get going soon in order to, because as the county financial advisor, I would tell you, you need to have that commitment from USDA in hand that they will lend you $33 million over that 30-year period before you start construction on the project. If you want to know, you have the funds available to complete the project, obviously. So that's something that's really important. And again, that's a process that could take some time, so we want to get that going as soon as possible. And that letter of commitment is really what we're looking for from USDA that says we will lend you permanent financing on these terms. And then once you, during a part of all of that, you can get your interim financing as well. You will line that up, you match up at the time of getting the letter of commitment. The banks that will lend you money on an interim basis will need to see that letter of commitment from USDA because that's what they're counting on taking out their interim financing. So that is all kind of weaved together from a timing standpoint. And then obviously finalizing the full design plan and cost with the concept. So that is my kind of high-level overview. I will have to take some questions from the group on that. And Bill, I may let you serve as intermediary if you want these questions.
With the numbers that you showed us, would it be possible to have a lower tax increase and still have enough money to?
So if I was going to run this as a totally kind of bare bones model that says, what's the least amount of property tax revenue that I would need in order to fund that, the answer is something slightly below 9%. you on that, because what that would show, I have to pull up the model, but what it would show is that the annual revenue would not be enough to cover your 1.5 million. What it would really be counting on is that this bank revenue in fiscal 2022, if you went ahead and increased it then, if you bank that and use that amount to supplement what would be shortfalls in the years thereafter on an annual basis, as long as you never went below zero from this column, to the fund balance column, and from a modeling perspective, that would show you have enough funds. But that is the bare minimum. And what that doesn't do is it doesn't guard against, if your sales tax goes down, your property taxes and realize twice that level, don't need more funds for capital contributions. So to directly answer your question, the bare minimum would be something slightly less than 9, but that's razor thin. It doesn't do anything.
Okay.
Why was USDA looked at as the preferred choice over the private bank market? I know we discussed all three, I just didn't know what was the final.
What was the question?
Why was USDA decided as the way to go?
So, David, the question is, why was USDA preferred over the commercial markets? You want me to answer it?
He's not going to hear you unless it's your
David, so my question is, why was USDA preferred over private market financing? Commercial.
Yeah, so good question. You plan to either of those other two markets, the public market or the bank market. The local government commission who approves any financing through those two markets would require that you repay the debt over a 20-year period. That's the maximum term they typically allow for school financing. And not only is it just a 20-year period, but they want you to pay on that level principal basis. So your highest payment is going to be your first year, and then it will go down thereafter. That's the local government commission guidelines for debt in the public market or the bank market, 20 years. And so that goes back to the scenario we ran earlier. You can certainly do that. That's very much an option. That's a very common option. Probably more, but it is more common option than the USDA route. But the issue here is that while you will pay less in total, because you're paying interest only for a 20-year period as opposed to a 30-year period, your annual impact is going to be more. That 1.5 million in debt service is going to go up a good amount, which means you're going to have to increase the property tax rate by more than 10 cents to do that. Now that's a trade-off. So a higher property tax impact to pay off that debt, but the debt paid off quicker, you get less in total. So those are, again, that is very much an option, but in looking at it, those amounts were, I can kind of play around on the fly here with what those are, but that was a much higher tax impact doing it that way.
Thank you. I knew we had discussed all three. I was just wondering why the final answer on that.
Mr. Chairman. Yes. I was looking at this chart. And this chart number page 4. So I was looking at this chart on page 4, where it talks about the net tax that we receive, and then the net tax available for debt service. It's the same amount. So if we're currently giving you $424,000 a year that comes from that sales tax revenue, and we take that to pay debt service, we no longer have that $400,000 to give to you to operate with. So now we tax the 10 cents to try to match to get to the 1.4 million that's on there. Where do we come up with the money to give you money to operate with?
Well, it's like capital, money that
additional tax increase other than the 10 cents. Because you just took away the money that we're normally
You're
using.
using that for debt service, you understand what I'm saying? So if you take that away from, if you use that for debt service, you wouldn't have the money to give you for maintaining the other three schools. So that would, you know, you can't, that wouldn't work. Am I right there, Ms. Bowler?
Yes, sir. Remember what he said, the current debt service, we already have debt service in excess of $8 million right now that's being
And I have
carried.
to mute myself and you unmute, so I can hear the discussion.
I don't know who's right now.
The feedback's coming on mine, and I'm gonna mute myself.
Okay.
You should be in this picture because we're already using it for something else.
You can't spend it twice.
Can't spend the same money twice. And only in simple math, but if we are spending that much money on the current school system that we have in place, this new school is gonna cost us roughly $150,000 to $200,000 extra to maintain all the support personnel and cleaning and all that stuff that has to go on. So that's another 2 cents that we're going to have to come on.
But you can't use that money for debt service. You're already using that to maintain schools, which you gotta have that to maintain the schools you already have.
So the 420 we got last year for operating funds or capital funds,
We'll operate with totally different, we're talking about.
the 420 that Commissioner Riggs was talking about, when there's operating capital, I couldn't hear, sorry.
Yeah, we're talking about,
You're talking about the restricted sales tax fund.
to maintain schools, that's
Right, that we got last year.
Am I wrong? That's the money that we use to buy the ACs and all that stuff that Larry's doing. And to maintain the buildings.
But we gotta keep the school construction in the debt service area that people voted for that 10 cent. If you take away that money that we use to maintain the schools, the only way to make it up is tax increase. But you're talking, you know, at least 4 cents or 5 cents, so that would be 15 cents or 14 cents tax increase. But if you can't do that, people would be really PO, because we gotta keep it at that 10 cent. You know, it can't go above that 10 cent. So we need to keep the project down to where they will go over that 10 cent for finance.
We can't rob the whole rest of the county just to build the school.
And then you don't, you know, so we gotta, you know, it's what it is.
The sheriff's already said it's going to be an extra RSO officers and it's going to be extra sheriff deputies. That all comes into supporting the school too.
USDA, they did the numbers, and they came up with, they didn't consider that money, they used the money that we get from other sources, but they came up with, to service the debt, it would take about 14 to 15 cents, which is about what we're saying, if you take, you use that money that's being used for improvements to the schools, that would be pretty much the same thing, we're talking the same numbers, so we really need to keep that cost down where it stays at that 10 or under, because that's what everybody voted for, thinking this is what we're gonna pay, the maximum we need to be paying is 10 cents. If we go above that, we might as well get ready to burn your house down. Ain't like the state.
All right, looking at the county appropriation history, 2020, 2021 was 405,878, 1920 was 405,878, 1819 was 295, 1718 was 295, 1617 was 298. The year before that was 323, and the year before that was back to 298.
Well, I would suggest, if you don't trust what we're saying.
No. I understand. I didn't
say, we need.
You listen to what I'm saying, please. I was talking, as he said earlier. I'm saying that's the money you're speaking of that's in this 1.1 billion that you said we bring in approximately every year. That's where all that money comes
What
from.
we need to do is get Mr. Chickwood and USDA before we get things finalized, so we know exactly what we're doing, you know, numbers to plan the project, so we know what we're doing. We don't want to be guessing.
Right, but what I'm asking is those numbers, that county appropriation is what you're saying, that 1.1 out of the restricted sales tax funds. I want to make sure we're all talking about the same numbers, that's why I'm asking.
Right.
Okay, so it's that capital expenditure is what comes out of that 1.1 million.
Right.
Okay,
Like I said, it doubled the last 2 years because it gave us a technology catch-up. I don't know how much longer till we're caught up, but that could probably be. And I'm not sitting here looking at the chart, I'm just using a round.
I think it'd be good to get Mr. Chickwood where he's actually here, because it's hard to hear him all, all.
He gave us 100,000.
And then I know, but that way we can always, and then get USDA.
It's right on this chart, he used it.
So we make sure we get the numbers right, so we get the figure right in the school, so we can move forward. Because we need to go on and get this done, so we move forward with the school.
I don't think anybody over here would just.
You know exactly where we are, because, we gotta service this debt, the county does for 30 years, and we won't.
It doesn't make any difference how you slice it. He took the $424,289 that is in the tax wrap and the tax revenue for those, for debt service. That's what you're trying to say. He took all of it for debt service. No, he left 100,000.
He left 100.
100,000.
He kept 100, but 100 is not.
$100,000, he just told you spent 390 something.
But he said you got to do your capital.
But we need to get with what we think we're gonna need. I think Rick has said the new school will be under warranty, so.
Can I add something to this conversation?
Sure.
What Mr. Cheapwood did was basically give you a baseline, said, if we put 100,000 back in capital needs on an annual basis, how much would that leave you in your cumulative fund balance? So really, the most important column that you're looking at on that chart is that last chart. So what he did, and rightfully so, virtually every project that we do this, you would go ahead and increase your taxes, so you build up that little pool. We're not gonna be spending that much money down the first year, actually, if you look at the cash flow, so that gives you that cushion. So then, as you have this additional funds, you can start adding back to the annual capital needs that the district might have as you go through. You're not really getting the impact full impact until 23, 20, or whatever you're on 24. The other thing Mr. Cheapwood did, and wisely so, is use a 1% annual increase in your tax base, in your property tax base. And given the amount of growth that you folks are forecasting, I think that's a very, very conservative number. You'll start seeing increased revenues that are coming in. Even if you don't increase taxes on the other debt service portion, you're gonna start seeing increases in your fund balance if you keep the tax rate the same. So what I would propose is let Mr. Cheapwood, Mr. Bowman, myself, Dr. Farrell, let me give him the cash flow that we generated for you. We have a little bit of flexibility how we spend those monies down. Then let him do you a definitive plan on what it would look like working with USDA, and then see how much money you can feed back to the school district on the capital side.
That would be good. That way we know exactly.
You got a real plan there that you can vote on rather than speculating on the numbers.
Yeah, we just want to know, at least, just want to know. We want to be sure of what you do, before you.
And then the other side of that is, if we can generate some savings in the actual construction of the project, that can go in that cumulative fund pot.
Right.
That will help offset that, or either add back to the district's, annual capital outlay. So I understand what the questions are, and you just need to have some more information, and I agree, we need to probably get Mr. Cheapwood here, once we've got the hard numbers from USDA, North Carolina DPI, and then marry it up together, and we go real fun.
That's right.
Mr. Chairman, what I would like to see is 5 years, what's it gonna cost the county? Employees, electricity, water, sewage, not just hard numbers here. I want you to see the other lawmakers, the whole 9 yards, see what they're talking about. You don't want any surprises, I don't want any surprises, and we, another 5 had a lot of them, so we participate on.
You talk about operating costs, not.
Operating, teacher, maintenance, everything. We should have some idea, you could possibly provide some sort of idea of that, so we can build in the cost of the building as well. Because we cannot go, we're not going over 10 cents.
We're trying to get our work done prior to folks kind of scattering for the holidays, and so we're pressing hard to get that. We just want to make sure that we know exactly what we're doing, you know, so we, those surprises, so what he's doing, I think is a good idea, that way we got the numbers and you know we're good and we can proceed on.
Entertain a motion to adjourn the Camden County Board of Education. Motion by Mr. Purcell, seconded by Mr. Heath, to adjourn. Mr. Neal, take a roll call.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Dunn?
Yes.
Ms. Adler? Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Purcell?
Yes.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Need a motion to adjourn.
So,